Your recovery strategy. There are different ways to look at disaster recovery. For instance, you can have a business entity that has basically business load balancing. If more than one office does the same task, during times of disaster to one office, that other office may be able to pick up the slack. What's the danger in that? And I'm not talking about IT or security risk. What's the danger to the people in the site that's being recovered at? If you prove you can do the job, you might be stuck with it. All those people in that disaster-affected site might be saying, hey, you guys literally are redundant. That's how the British fire people. You've been made redundant. And they invite you to leave, right? Good. Self-service. If you can pick up your business entity and move it to another branch for that time, set up in the conference room, set up in spare offices, things like that, double up in offices. You do that until it's been resolved. Okay, load balancing, moving the business to that other entity, that's again transferring the responsibility to it, and then actually setting up, taking the people and the equipment and moving it to another branch during that time. Reciprocal arrangement. If it goes down here, maybe one of our competitors will let us set up shop in their office. Why in the world would your competitor do that?
Because you do the same for them.
Yeah, it's a mutual aid, and usually it's established by contract or memorandum. Anyone ever worked in an environment or an industry where they did that? I worked for a newspaper in Las Vegas, and there were only 2 presses in Las Vegas, and our newspaper and the competing newspaper each said, hey, if something happens to the press, paper's got to get out. We will operate for you. Same kind of risk. Eventually got to the point of, hey, if we can operate with 1 press, why are we both paying for 2? And they made a joint operating agreement, and they only printed with 1. Eventually, now there's only 1 paper in Las Vegas. Dedicated alternate sites. You could build a facility that could be used in terms of a disaster. Does anyone do this? No. Why not? Way too expensive. Oh, incredibly cost prohibitive. Who's the only entity that does this?
Federal Reserve.
So who's that?
The Federal Reserve.
Federal government, yeah, federal government. Homeland Security's got one. Congress used to have one under the Greenbrier Hotel. You can go and tour it now. It was there.
Some banks do.
What's that?
Some banks do. If you have the luxury of having 2 data centers.
Okay, all right. I'm a member of USAA Financial Services. They used to have Phoenix as their hot site for San Antonio. And they were mirroring all their data. They could flip a switch and just do it in less than a second. It got too expensive even for USAA. And USAA is really profitable. They got out of the business just like 2 or 3 years ago. And now they use some cold site capability and they use some failover. Work from home. Is that a viable solution? Just say, hey, look, folks, don't come to the office. Telecommute for the duration. Yeah. Oddly enough, I was working in the D.C. area on 9/11, and we actually had some of our sysadmins off-site. When we sent them home, they were able to conduct operations from there, and it was very useful, mostly in locating our personnel, some of whom had been scheduled to be at the Pentagon that morning. External suppliers. There are vendors who create hot, warm, and cold sites. They build those shells out in the desert for people to come to during disasters. Again, really expensive. Is none a strategy? Yes. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. It might be cost effective to just rebuild, to just wait through whatever it is. If your business operation is not time critical, if you can take a week or 2 off and resume, okay. Anyone think of an entity that might be able to do that? Schools. Schools can take a couple weeks off and then come back and still be a school, right? All right, different ways of approaching backup. Synchronous and asynchronous, remote, offsite. either mirroring it in real time or backing it up at intervals. We talked about full, differential, and incremental. The one that takes the most time, of course, is full. The easiest to restore is full. Electronic vaulting and remote journaling. Anyone ever heard of that term before? You're just moving the transaction logs, not all of the data. Anyone think of an operational environment where that would be very useful? Banks would be very important, right? Sometimes if it's database intensive, that might be another good one too, right? Tape rotation. Anyone still use tape? Tape's not bad. Tape's very good. Huh?
Stick things to the wall all the time.
Yeah, tape rotation is when you don't continue to buy tapes every day or every week. You actually cycle through them, reuse tapes again. We used to call, anybody remember the system that you would call? GFS? Yeah. Grandfather, father, son. You'd have the full and the differentials and the incrementals, and you'd rotate them through. You use your last full as your next. Okay. That's old people talk. Yeah. Considerations, things that you might want to do. You might want to back up everything. Very expensive. Very expensive. But it can be easy to restore if you have everything at your disposal. It's also a huge security risk because you have everything at your disposal. It's something that if the attacker got their hands on, it's the whole shooting match. You might want to arrange it according to the priorities and the triage that you've already assessed from your business impact analysis. You might want to store it either on-site for ready access during an event. You grab it in a kit and drag it out, or off-site so that it doesn't get damaged if your facility gets damaged. You might want to have copies in both places, doubling your cost. You might want to encrypt it. Why might you not want to encrypt it?
Key loss.
Yeah, you're in the middle of a disaster already. You don't know who's going to be able to respond or in what manner you're able to respond. That's one more thing you got to take with you is the keys. One more thing you got to take with you is maybe the cryptography system so that you can do the decrypt, right? It could be a pain in the neck. Testing. How often are you going to test this and to what level? We're going to talk about some tests too. Different kinds of alternate sites. Depending on your ability to afford it, depending on your RTO and RPO goals, you may want to buy different kinds of sites. Interesting chart here. Multiple processing centers just means you have that redundancy built in with concurrent operations. It's very expensive, but it's almost instantaneous. Hot site. What's a hot site compared to the other types of site? I think we're going to define that in a minute. There we go. Multiple processing centers. Load balancing. Again, you're having simultaneous operations in several locations. During an event, you can push the load to somebody else. Mirrored. It is a functioning copy of the primary site, including all data, bit by bit. Incredibly cost prohibitive. Again, very, very few entities can afford to do that. Hot site. Hot site. What's a hot site? How's it different than a mirrored site?
Doesn't have the data, and it's not...
Probably doesn't have the data loaded, yeah? You can just go there, taking the tapes with you from your backup, whether it's off-site or on-site, load the data up, flip the switch, and you're ready to go again. Good. Warm site. Warm site. Yeah, go ahead.
Warm site, it has a few equipment, but it will take time to get everything going.
Good. Yeah, it's got the equipment. It might not be configured yet. It may be just be in boxes. It may have been delivered there by the vendor. It's not ready to go. You're going to have to plug everything in. You're going to have to set it up. You have to load the data. It takes a little bit longer to go. Cold site. Cold site.
It's a building.
It's a building. It's a shell. It might have water and electricity, maybe comms, connected to it, but you better give the disaster recovery team a credit card so they can stop and buy the PCs on their way to the site, right? Mobile unit. Anyone ever use a mobile unit? I've seen a few. They're pretty cool. It's like having a semi-tractor trailer. They pull it up to the back of your organization. It's got machines in it. You have to come in and configure them, and you have to load the data in it, and they can run it. Often they can run it without plugging into a power main. They're actually running it off the diesel. Rock on, right? Very expensive, very expensive. And a lot of time to get it going operational because you have to build everything according to your needs. Redundancy, as we said, repeated configurations. But it should help you get a continuity of operations that you couldn't get with just moving to an alternate site. You need those backups. You need them, so you can help restore if there's something that goes wrong with your redundancy. People are very hard to build redundancy into. One of the things, again, you can do is cross-train them. You can let them know their assignments ahead of time so that their scheduling is set up so you have somebody off-site at all times that can take over the interests of that business operation in times of an event. You can use the technology to give you that redundancy. You want to eliminate single points of failure. And can you make your water source redundant? Can you make your power source redundant? We're going to talk about some ways to do power in the physical security domain. Can you make water redundant? Both incoming fresh water and sewage capabilities? Can you do that? You can have bottled water delivered. You can have porta potties set up outside. It sucks, but yeah, you can do it. You can do it.